Thank you, Yvonne. So, good morning, good afternoon, good, whatever time of day it is at your side. Welcome, welcome, welcome at our BIAN webinar, where we will guide you to one of our largest achievements in the last 2 years. It's about the Agentic Banking Studio. So, if we can go to the next slide, I would first of all have a warm welcome to everybody dialing in from around the globe. So the program of today, as we can see on the next slide, this is me, Hans Tesla, the Executive Director, and Anap. So Anap is our program manager at BIAN, and BIAN is the Banking Industry Architectural Network, but he is also in the lead of developing all the tools. So what we experienced over the last few years is that when the BIAN model matured and we got more and more content into the models, we had different angles and so on and so forth, that it also became very difficult for people to understand the BIAN models and for people to use the BIAN. So we were looking for a way to make the usage and adoption of the BIAN model easier, and that's why Anap and his team developed a whole set of tools. So the tools we will show you, we will explain to you, we will demonstrate, so there will be live demo. So the tools are far beyond PowerPoint. So there are real live code, and we make this code available today to a selected group of BIAN members, because everything is in beta release, and then we will make it available for a wider range of BIAN members, and maybe in the second half of the year we will also make it available for non-members. So that is depends a little bit on the quality of the tools, the stability of the tools, and so on and so forth. So if we go to the next slide, then you will see, so this is the welcome and the setting. I will give a very, very short overview of BIAN for people who don't know us that well. Then Anap will explain about the current state tools, because we have a whole set of tools. We have architecture tools in place, but also developer tools in place. And then at number 4, we will also see what's in the pipeline. So what will be next and what is already demonstratable and so on and so forth. Then Anap and I will discuss the next steps, and then at the end we try to get about 10-15 minutes for a Q&A. All the questions we cannot answer online during this webinar, we will answer them in writing, and everybody who signed up for this webinar will get a link to the recording, get a link to the slides, and also get a link to the Q&A. So Anap, let's see what's next. So what next is, and you know that when you're in this call, that if you are working at a financial institution or working for an institution that maybe is your customer, that it is not easy to get it ready for the future. A lot of organizations have, let's call it, and I don't like the name, but let's say a legacy environment, maybe some outdated tools, and so on and so forth. So how do you migrate from, let's say, the current state to the to-be state, to the future state? And that is where BIAN comes in, where we have the models to support you, where we have the process definitions to support you, but also when we have the tooling to support you. So on the next slide, you can see what BIAN is all about. So we started in 2008, and our mission is to solve the integration issues for the bank. And integration issues in 2008 were primarily inside the bank. How do I add additional functionality to my existing IT environment? It was risky, it was time consuming, and it was extremely costly. Over the years, we moved from internal integration to external integration. So we have a full range of APIs. We have 259 pre-built APIs in our API environment, and our API environment is open for members and non-members. And when we had those APIs, then we asked ourselves the question, can we not start using those APIs inside the bank to solve the integration issues? So we moved inside the bank again. We have the APIs, we have the microservices, and we started a project called the Coreless Bank. So the underlying idea is, can you run a bank without a core system? The answer is not yet. But what we did, we provided a framework that helps financial institutions to move to a best-of-breed environment, to move to a composable environment, to move to a composable architecture, to move to a composable IT landscape. So when you are interested and you have the time, go to the BIAN.org homepage and take all the material that's here. So we are a relatively small organization, so we need the help. So the members participate in creating the content. So we have a global ecosystem from banks, technology provider, fintechs, and so on and so forth. So everybody from his own expertise helps us to create a model that is sustainable. So on the next slide, you will see the financial institutions. So these are the financial institutions that are a member of BIAN as of today. You see it is from all around the globe. So for those who don't know, Absa Bank is in South Africa. Yeah, Wells Fargo is in the US, but besides Wells Fargo, we see Warburg Bank in Kuwait, Vietnam International Bank, US Bank, and so on and so forth. So we have banks in North and South America, Asia Pac, Europe, and so on and so forth. So we are very well represented around the globe. That also implies that our model is usable all around the globe. So it's a universal generic model. So don't look in the model for some specific regulatory requirements in Australia. They are not in. You have to add them yourself. On the next slide, you see I would call it the other half of the membership, the tech partners. So we have integrators, we have solution providers, we have consultants, we have training institutions, and so on and so forth. And again, you see a lot of familiar names, less familiar names, and unknown names. And that's good because that also implies that the model is applicable for organizations large and small. Maybe they are in a niche, and maybe they are a fintech, but at least it gives them a standardized way of doing it. And we continue with this list on the next slide, where we have the other ones. So this is the whole, more or less, ecosystem. Besides the members, we also have another category that you will see on the following slide. So we have 4 academic partners who helps us occasionally, and I must admit it was more in the past than in the current, with doing POCs, case studies, and so forth. So Carnegie Mellon, Singapore Management University, IDRBT in India, and Competence Center Sourcing from the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. In the middle layer, you will see standard bodies that are active in our industry. And with all of them, we have an agreement in place that we can use their materials, they can use our materials. So we prevent in that manner to invent wheels that already exist. Our primary focus is ISO 20022. So we try to align as much as possible because ISO 20022 is known around the globe, so people can recognize the naming conventions and so on and so forth that we use in our models. And on the bottom line, you see 3 accredited training partners. They can provide different types of BIAN trainings, online training, classroom training. We also have several certification programs in place, so they are capable of doing that all. So this is my short overview of BIAN, and now I hand over to Arnab.
Hi, thanks, Hans. Okay, so let's go into the next couple of sections, and we really have 2 major sections here. So one is to look at the Agentic Banking Studio as it is today. This is something we announced in November last year in Chicago, and we have demonstrated this in South Africa in the BIAN Summit with Standard Bank, and in Australia with CBA. We got feedback from these events and we have improved things. So you will see some small changes in that part, the first part of the presentation. And then in the second part, we will show you things that we didn't show there. So even if people were in those summits, you will see things that you haven't seen. And these tools you will see are of two major categories. One is targeted very much towards architects rather than developers. And the other category is about governance in agentic banking. These are the two main areas. So let's have a look. So just to quickly remind ourselves of what we are trying to do overall. So we are trying to go from the monolith that is in the bank today to the decomposed, functional, reusable building blocks in the bank of the future. And BIAN, why BIAN? Because BIAN is defining the functionality, the functional boundary of these reusable building blocks. That's what BIAN is doing, is defining the functional boundary and maybe a bit more. So in trying to do that, BIAN came up with the landscape, the service landscape, the bank on a page view. And we're all aware, or hopefully we're all aware, that each of these small blocks here, which we call a service domain, is that functional unit, that functional building block. So it could be a current account, it could be investment portfolio management, it could be a loan, it could be anything across any type of banking, whether it's private banking, whether it's retail banking, whatever. Now, for each of these building blocks, BIAN has defined an API spec, not for all of them, but for the ones mainly in the center of this diagram. So BIAN basically defined what the interface spec could look like for each of these building blocks. That's what we had to work with. Now, whatever we see now is what we are doing, taking that as the foundation and going into the future. So if we think about it in another way, BIAN originally defined the conceptual layer. We have the landscape, the service domains, the service operations, the business scenarios, the business object model, key components to cover different aspects of what happens within a bank. Now, from the conceptual layer, we started defining the logical layer. The logical layer, as in the REST API specs, the async API specs. We have been doing this over the last 5, 6 years, perhaps. I think from 2018 we started doing this. So that's where we were going. Now, in the new situation, we are going from there to the physical layer, to the actual microservices, to the agents, to the applications, to the code. So this red bit on the top summarizes what this thing we are trying to talk about now is doing. Is taking the standard, the specifications, and generating software code. Not just code, it's generating software. So, and it's doing it on repeat. So the idea is not to have built a piece of software once, but to be able to take a standard and repeatedly build your software. As the standard evolves, you get a new piece of software or an upgraded piece of software. That's the idea of what we're doing here. And why are we doing this? There are two reasons for doing this. So, and the primary reason is here, the AI readiness point, is that when when we were talking to people who are trying to write code out of BIAN, even before ChatGPT became a thing in November 2022, then people were facing issues. If I try to write code, BIAN is a great reference architecture, but we also want to make it a great standard. And to make it a great standard, it must be possible to create software out of these specifications, in addition to it being a great reference architecture. So how do we do that? We try to create software and see what's wrong. So that's one of the big purposes of this initiative, to be able to take the standard and generate code. So we find what is lacking, what can be improved in the standard. And in trying to do so in the Chicago Summit, for the Chicago Summit last year, we did a POC with a few service domains. We took session dialog, we took current account, and we took payment order. And we took these service domains and we linked them up in a business scenario, and we took the specifications After remediating them, we went through a set of 10, 15 steps. We remediated everything, and then we generated code, and it made sense. You could write software, you could write a backend, you could write a database, you could write the vector DB context and all of that using these new specs, and then you could basically generate the code and create the software and then run it and see if it works. So that's the idea. Now, of course, this does not mean that you have a production ready system. No, you have a system that is as ready as what is specified in the standard. So yes, I want to spend a bit of time so on this AI readiness point, which is key and the key output of what we are doing with this agentic banking studio, improving the standard. Okay, so we spoke about that. Now we'll speak about the actual tool itself, the BIAN Agentic Banking Studio. So really, it has three key components to it. One is identify BIAN service domains and other components, service operations, business scenarios, whatever, in existing code, in existing documents, and existing applications. So use your existing applications, run the components of the studio, identify these things. Then generate a running application, not code. Code generation is very easy, but also running application is not that difficult. So generate a running application. So that is the microservice, the backend, the database, the vector DB, all of that, as per the BIAN specifications, as per the service domain, the business object model, and so on. And then expose this functionality with an MCP connector. So why an MCP connector? Because then if you do that, then you can interact with it with natural language. An agent can interact with it, or a human being can interact with it without having to write code. That's the key point. Then connect these MCP connectors into an A2A. This is a protocol that came out last year, led by Google, into an A2A agentic workflow to create a running application for a business scenario, which a user can interact with in a chat. So this is the whole idea. You have these three parts, and this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to create a running application that is like a business service. In this case, it's a standing order. A customer can go into a bank, set up a standing order, and execute the first payment. That's the idea. So now to see it a bit. So this is what, when you log in, the Agentic Banking Studio looks like today. This is in a beta state. It has issues, which I will say right at the start. And, we are basically trialing it, as Hans said, with a few banks. And we'll open it up to more people, banks and other members to trial it, give us feedback and so on. So as we said, it has key components, the one, two, three, and four. And we can start with the service domain analyzer. Now, in the service domain analyzer, what happens is you take a document, let's say it could be a PDF document. I'll see if I have something to hand. One sec. So yeah, I'll just show you. This is something we did at our summit in Standard Bank in South Africa. And Standard Bank created this case study just to test this studio out. And this was the user story. This is like a requirements document, a simple requirements document, if you like. This person, they have come to their bank, to their manager, relationship manager, and asked for certain things to add their child to, and then you have to do a KYC, you have to open a funeral policy and all of that stuff. That's the idea. I won't run that here right now because it takes a good 2-3 minutes and that will go out of our webinar time. But if you run it, it takes a good 2-3 minutes, as I said, and then you can see the results here. The results appear like this. So in the results, you will see strong match service domain, service operations, business scenarios, generated scenario, and so on. So if I go to the strong matched service domains, you see party reference data directory, you see a relevance score, you see a confidence, and you see which part of the PDF document was used to identify this. And that's the idea across the different service domains that it identified. It will also, if you go to the top, It will also identify service operations that were strongly matched, update details about the customer's directory entry. This is where, you have to update party reference data directory with some details and so on. And there is service operations matched for each of the service domains based on a part of the document that requires that to be done. So all of that is there. There's a lot of analysis on top of that. And then finally, it comes up with a sequence diagram like that. And these are all BIAN service domains, what service operations are being called, and so on. Obviously, this is a recommendation, and a human being looks at it and says whether it's right or wrong, and they might want to change it. So eventually, you can basically save the scenario like this, and if you save it, then there is another part of the system where you can go and view the scenario. So I can, for example, I can go here in the specification generator. Here you can generate other specifications as well, but you can save the document analyze scenarios, and then it opens up here as a scenario. And then you have this flow diagram where you can edit it. And yes, it looks a bit busy, as you can see, and we have to do improvements, as I said, but you have a flow diagram like this. And the idea then is that from this flow diagram, you can then, sorry, one sec. Whoops. Yeah, you can then select software components that you have already generated and drag and drop them onto the canvas like that. And then once you drag and drop these software components, you can save this as an application. You need software components for each of the service domains. And I will show in a sec what those software components are and how you generate them. You save them. And then when you save them, this whole business scenario becomes a running application. And this is all deployed to the cloud and everything. And it's all running, and you can call it, it writes data to the database and does anything that is specified within it. Obviously, the quality of what it does and the capability of what it does is directly dependent on, directly proportional to the amount of specification that is there in the starting point of the standard. And this is what we are trying to improve through the AI readiness. It will still not be complete, and we have other tooling, which I'll show in a bit, where you can add to the BIAN standard to make it adjust it to what you need and then generate these sort of things. So anyway, we go back to the start. So this is how you analyze stuff. In addition, what you can do is you can also analyze, one sec, you can also analyze code. You can also analyze COBOL code. So we have some sample code here from AWS, and you can basically, is about a card application, and what you can do is you can, right click this and say explain with BIAN. And if you say explain with BIAN, then it generates a BIAN explanation like this, shows you the service domains, the service operations, and all of that. The next thing we're doing is trying to extract the logic out of here. Something, Guy, our BIAN architect, lead architect, has been talking about, and to put them in the generated service operations from this extracted logic into there. So that's the next thing we're doing. It's not something I can show right now, but it's coming. So that's the kind of thing. So we can take a document as a source, we can take code as source and extract service domains and service operations. Now, if I go back to this, then you see we have other things like the sample data generator and all of that. But the next interesting thing is the microservice generator. So what happens here is you have a list of BIAN services. Now, these BIAN services have to be AI ready for it to work here properly. We only have 4 service domains, or in fact, parts of 4 service domains that are AI ready right now. And we are going to have more soon. So they will start appearing here as they become AI ready. So once they're AI ready, for example, I can take this investment portfolio management, for example, and then I can take components from here, MS generator, Docker build and deploy, cloud deployment, all of that. And then it has got a lot of details that are pre-filled. Currently this is running on MongoDB as a database. So it will generate a MongoDB schema and an actual database. It's using Quadrant as a vector DB. It's using OpenAI as the LLM layer for generating stuff, but also for writing embeddings and things like this. Then it does a Docker build and deploy, and there's again lots of configurations within that. And finally, a cloud deploy where you can choose Azure, AWS, GCP. Currently only supporting Azure. We're working on AWS and GCP. And then, you can select which region and all of that, what backup regions, what CPU, memory, etc. you want to allocate. You set all that, and you execute the workflow. This again takes a good 2-3 minutes, and it executes the workflow and it generates the service. So when you generate the service, you see a deployment happen in your Azure cloud. And basically, that deployment that happens in your Azure cloud is a running application. So this is something, again, we can look at it if somebody is interested later on. But when this all runs, then you get something like this. Sorry, this is an MCP. I will show a microservice. So you get like a microservice like this. And the microservice basically runs on Azure, and you can open it, and it will have a Swagger UI. It will have all the definitions of BIAN exactly as in the standard. It will have all the subcomponents, the BOM attributes, everything. The database will be based on the BOM and all of that. So it will have all of that. You can call it from here. And if you call it from here, then it will write data to the database, which is also automatically generated. You don't do anything there. Now, the thing here, of course, is that it is all being generated based on the BIAN standard. Now, it is also possible that you take the BIAN standard, add your own additions, and generate this. It will work exactly the same, and we'll show that next. So that is that. So you can generate services like this. You can also generate the MCP connectors like that. So you can take like a current account, you can take an MCP generator, you can take the Docker build, the cloud deploy, and it does all the generation and puts it in the cloud and all that. Again, it takes a good few minutes for this to work. Now, having done all that, you can generate each of these MSs and MCPs for each service domain. So you see, these are for one service domain. It will have all the service operations and all that. So then what you can do is you can create an application. So you can go here, and these are things I've generated before. I was just showing you how to do it. So if I take each of these service domains, is a session dialog MCP, for example, running on Azure. And this is a current account MCP, again running on Azure. And then I can do my scenario. So scenario we did is you have a session dialog initiate, that's the service operation. You then have a session dialog product or service invocation initiate. So that's we initiate a product or service invocation. So we are invoking this product current account. Then we do a retrieve on the current account. And then we do a payment on the current account. So we do a payment initiate on the current account payment initiate. And then finally, we can also do a payment order. And after the payment initiate, you go do the payment order initiate. And then once you have done these, then you have all these things. So you can say things like, when you retrieve the current account, show me the details of the current account, and so on. So you can do a lot of configurations here through each step. Again, I won't save this. It will take up around 2 or 3 minutes of our time. I'll go to an application I did before. So this is 18th May I did yesterday to this 19th of May. It's exactly the same thing. So this is what I did. And if I go here, then I go to the chat. So you have the application chat, and you select your A2A application here. And then, whoops. Place. Okay. So, and then you can say hi, and with any luck, it might come up. Okay, so what it says is, hello, I can help you set up a recurring payment. You'll be able to enter a pays info, payment amount, currency frequency, then I'll initiate the payment for you. Would you like to proceed? Yes. And bear in mind that none of this is programmed. This is what the LLM is asking me based on what we have configured in this agentic workflow. It's all, it's all using AI. It's none of this. We haven't programmed that you are doing. You see, it now is doing session dialog initiate as specified, and it says tool executed successfully. Now it's doing session dialog payment or service invocation initiate, and it says tool executed successfully. So this thing initiates the session as we speak about it. Now, what I can do is I can go to my current account data and give it a current account ID to use. In a real life, you won't have to do that. You will log in with your ID and your current accounts will be found and it will ask you to select one. But this is a limited scope scenario. So I'm giving it the current account details here. So it's again targeting that workflow, and you see it does current account retrieve, which says tool executed successfully. It's found the current account, is given some details, and then it says, would you like to proceed with setting up a recurring payment? If yes, please provide all these details and let me know the details to continue. So what I can then do is I can go here and say, give some details from there. Let's say, and I say pay is Nigel Nobody. Nigel's account number is that. Nigel's bank name is HSBC, whatever frequency is monthly and all that. And it says, thank you for the details. Here is a summary of the recurring payment setup. Please confirm these details are correct before I proceed. Please, yes to continue. And I say yes. And then it then again targets the same agent, and it should call the right tools to call the right service operations. As you saw, it does current account payment initiate and then payment order initiate it calls. And then, yeah, it says it has done all these, all steps completed successful and all of that. Now, the idea behind all of this is you generate the application and you immediately run it. So if I go here, so it's today is 19th of the 5th, and it's 13:35 is when it's written. It's 14:35 is using GMT. We are on British Summer Time, so I'm in London, and so it's the payment written to account 777, pay Nigel Nobody, and all of that. So that's the idea. You generate an application and you have it running instantaneously. You can update it as well later on in our later parts of the tooling. So with all of that, what I'll do is I will stop talking about this tool and I'll go into something else. So this is what we have, just to summarize, this is what we have today in a beta version. Some banks are trialing it with us, and we are open to getting more users in it at a gradual rate as and when we can support that. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. So now going back to the presentation, skip all of that. There's slides around the same thing there. And we will move. Okay, we will maybe touch upon this a bit, the application landscape mapper. So the application landscape mapper is another part of this tool where basically you look at the BIAN landscape, and this has got all the service domains in it. But the critical point here is you can add your own attributions to it. So you can create new attributes or you can configure existing. So there's an existing set of attributes. You might want to say this service domain uses a low headcount, uses certain technology stacks, is of business priority critical, and so on. You can do this for the service domains, for the business domains, and then you can run queries across the landscape to see what service domains are of business priority critical, or what service domains cost me above a certain amount to run, things like this, or more complex queries depending on what attributions you have put in. So as you put in the attributions, we use, of course, AI to run these natural language queries. So you have a way to run like natural language queries here and find things. But yeah, I will go out of there and move to the next bit. Okay. Okay. So let's move on to here. Um, the next bit is, yeah.
Before you continue, maybe it is good also to show the API comparison tool, because I think that's also very important for a lot of
Okay,
organizations.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's
Thank
do that.
you.
So, so a bit on certification. So I think in 2024, we we came up with our certification document on how to do it. So API matching, mapping, and certification alignment level one, level two. So the idea was that if you look at it as a payload of an API, the top level will be alignment. So it's the most loose level. Then as you go deeper, like to the data types, you have L1. And then as you go further deeper, you have L2. So this was certification based on structural alignments of API attributes. That's what any standards body would do, like Open Banking UK or whoever else. They would look at an API structure, compare it to what BIAN has published, and then do a matching. And we have that. So we have that in our API align tool. But also, in addition to that, we have this new way of certification, which is based on the functionality of what the service operation exposes and the ability to test that functionality. So, if you look at the tool as well here, we can go, oops, one sec. So we can go to this place, developer toolkit and the test center. And basically, for each of the service operations, we have a set of test cases. We have 10 at the moment for each, but we can have more. And these tests are based on sample data that we generate, but also based on the specifications we have. So, at times, uh, basically, these tests will be much better once we have gone through the whole um, AI readiness bit. But still, we have all these test cases, and the idea is that you can take a test case and you have a set of tools. So, we can take anyone's APIs. In this case, we have created, use the BIAN APIs, but we can take anyone's APIs, generate MCPs for it. And once we generate the MCPs, they're available for testing in the test center. So I can then take one test case and I can run it like this. And when I run the test case, I expect a certain type of output. And if the output matches my expectations, then the test has passed. Now, the critical point here is that um, it was initially successful and so on. So the critical point here is that in this case, we are not looking at strict structural alignment. We are looking more at semantical matches or semantic matches, which means, if I want to initiate a current account and it expects a name and an account number and an account number type, a currency, and available balance, whatever else, then we can say it aligns with BIAN, even though the attribute names might not exactly match. But for the exact match, we have the other possibility, which is also there. So that's the bit on the testing, and this is also obviously a very important tool, and it will become especially important as we have more and more service domains come through the AI readiness stream. So that's the idea. Okay, so I move on to the next part. So the next part is the future state. Okay, let me make this bigger. Future state. Future state as of now, of course. So for the Agentic Bank Studio, some of the key things that will improve is we'll have a containerized architecture. It is containerized, but it's not currently easily deployable anywhere. So we're working on that to make it easily deployable onto any cloud. So then like using Terraform and stuff. Then the MS generation will have gRPC support, but also critically it will support more programming languages. Right now we support the MERN stack. In the future it will support many others like Java, Python, whatever else. The SQL today is only MongoDB. In the future, we will support SQL databases, like especially Postgres, MySQL, and things like this. And then multiple vector DB support. We will support event-driven flows. We have already built this with Kafka, but we are just testing it and integrating it. And non-functional support around native security, performance optimization, and all of that. So all of that is coming. Just to summarize that part. Now, the other thing to talk about is whatever we saw so far, most of that we showed in South Africa and Australia, and we got a lot of feedback. So And some of the feedback is not directly related. Like, one of the pieces of feedback we got is there's a lack of AI native enterprise architecture tools. That's the feedback we got in general, not about our platform necessarily. And need for document to API mapping automation. So our mapping tools to what we had at BIAN was very much API spec to API spec. But what if you had a spreadsheet? We showed some stuff with PDFs, but what if you had a spreadsheet? And a spreadsheet is a very well used component everywhere. So to support that, there is also a gap in the agent governance standards. Like everybody's building apps that can automate everything, but how are they governed? What if they do something wrong? How will you detect and stop it? So that's a gap in the market in general. There are of course some tools, but there is no real standard around it. And then requirement for everything to be secure. So not by secure we mean really properly secure, like ISO compliant. There are many ISO data security standards like 27001 and so on, and we need to comply with all of that, especially if these tools are to be used by a bank internally. So we have to do that, and we're working on that. Uh, One other point which I have heard many times is it would be great to see the impact of each business object, each data attribute across the BIAN model. So these are some of the things we got. And so how do we address that? And this is the future state, is the BIAN ontology. you know, what can we do beyond the documentation we have? So we have today a static set of documents, even the API specs, but how can we turn that into a real ontology that an LLM can use to do many things, come up with new flows, map legacy systems, assess the maturity, certify solutions as well in using what we have, but even at the next level, and all from one catalog. So that's the idea. So in trying to address those, we have come up with a tool that we are working on, which is called the Schema Studio. It's a code name. It will change. It will have a different name, and it has some key stuff like it has an environment to edit business objects and service domains to create your own copy and edit those, add to those, change those. A very powerful workflow designer. Sequence diagrams automatically generated and then editable with mapping of attributes, a mapper of spreadsheet based attributes to BIAN using AI, and conformance assessment and all of that. So in summary, what is it is it's a BIAN native, not retrofitted designer. So it's not fitted onto something else. It starts with BIAN at its core. AI is used only for reasoning. It's not supposed to generate stuff for you that is not in the model. And then an end-to-end loop. And if it does, it will clearly mark that is for you to review. And then an end-to-end loop, design, generate, map, certify, all that. Whatever you do here will feed into the process of generating the service domains. So we've talked about that. What does it look like? Looks a bit like this at the moment. So these are all the BIAN artifacts. So firstly, we have the business objects. So you can see a business object here, different business objects here. So you can see account, for example, and we have all the attributes of account. We have the sub attributes of account, and you can go down to any level within that business object. You see their data types, you see whether they are required or not, and all of that. Then you also see relationships, which what it extends, and for example, it extends log. What attributes are inherited from that object? You see that. You see all its relationships with other objects, and you see its impact. What is the impact of this? Which other objects are impacted, but also later on you see which service domains are impacted by this business object, and you see which sequences. These are sequences we generated, and this is the beauty of this, is it's not static. If I generate a new sequence, I generated something with that use case that we just worked with, then I can see the impact in that generated scenario from this. And then we can also have a set of business scenarios where these impact is. We haven't gone to that yet. So that's the idea. Then you have the service domains, and This is another view of the service domains. And if I look at that, for example, you see this is the control record for current account. This is an AI corrected version, an AI ready version of the current account, so it looks a bit different. And then you can see obviously the business object connections. You can go further and further down into all the business object attributes directly from the service domain. You see all the service operations in here. From here, you can generate an API spec with the specification. You can add your own attributes to this and create your own service domain and generate API specs from it. And then you can see sample data or generate your own sample data from it. So you have a sample data generator here. So all of that. So you can create your own service domain, you can do all that. So the other thing you can do as well is in here, if I show you, what else can I show? Okay, so the other thing maybe I missed in the class, sorry, this is a bit new also to me. So what we can have a look at is the Explorer, I think. Can we? No, it doesn't seem to respond. Okay, we'll go somewhere else if we are able to. Okay. Yeah. So the other thing maybe because we're a bit short on time, what I'll do is I'll show some of the mappings which are quite interesting. So I can take a source system here. Um, okay, maybe let me show a source system how we do. So you can take a spreadsheet and you can upload a spreadsheet and then it brings all the columns of the spreadsheet and then you can take a field as a name and description. Right now I have a name and description. You can have more obviously in the future. And then you can basically continue and call it a system. You can call it a test webinar system in this tool. And it creates a new system with all these fields and data types loaded from that spreadsheet. So once you do that, you have a mapping system where you can do a new mapping. You can take the test webinar, and then you can ask AI to suggest which BIAN service domains that test spreadsheet links to. And I shouldn't have run this because it will take some time, but it should come up with recommendations on which BIAN service domains this spreadsheet is kind of aligned to. So it comes up with a lot of these party reference area directory, you can choose whatever you want, and then you can go to the next step. And when you go to the next step, you create a mapping, map sheet, and you create mapping. And then you can again run AI suggestions here, which will take your spreadsheet on the left and your BIAN service domain to the right and do mappings. Now I won't run this because it will again eat up 3 or 4 minutes here. So what I'll do is I will come back to another one that I did before and you can see what it kind of does. So in this mapping, you can see it's actually the same thing, same spreadsheet. So you have many service domains here. So you have party reference data directory, you have party lifecycle management and so on. And you see for each attribute on the left where there is a reasonable mapping, then there is a mapping done here. Then you can export this to a spreadsheet, an API spec, whatever you want. That's the idea. So that's another key part of this. Obviously, nothing is good without a chat. So there is a chat, and the new chat is it stores history, and you can basically ask questions like this. This is a simple question, but you can do also what we showed there. You can upload a spreadsheet, you can find a sequence diagram, and then you can save the sequence diagram in your set of sequence diagrams, edit those, and do things with it. So all of these, we're using a graphing DB behind it. We're doing, we have a complete BIAN ontology for the whole model to do all of this. So now, what we also have, because ISO 20022, we have mappings to that. We also have a browser for that model, but more importantly, what we have is if you go to the service domains, we have the mappings to ISO 20022. Sorry, I think I've done too many things now. I've crashed it. Anyway, doesn't matter. We'll come back to it later. Um, we're running out of time, so I'll talk about another topic quickly. uh, agent governance. And really, as we build these systems which generate software, and it generates software components which has agentic components within it, A2A workflows, MCP, and all of that. These can behave in a way that is not predetermined. So they can do things that we don't want them to do, or a malicious actor wants them to do. So, how do we control and govern these agents? And that is really something, we are really looking at, because obviously we can't just generate stuff and hope for the best. It needs to be governed, properly governed, and so on. So with that, we are working on this uh, tool, but also this set of rules, this protocol, where everything we do, every agent we create, it declares an intent. It has a scope. It records all decisions. There are policies that must be enforced, especially the EU AI Act, which is in force already, and we must follow. There's the gate execution, there's a validation tool, and all of these. So all of these things that we are building very much must follow a governance pattern, a governance protocol. So to give us a bit more idea on that, what we are really saying is that these agents can't just do whatever they're asked to do. They must follow policies. Just because a human being asks them to do something, can't do that. So it might be wrong. So it might be non-compliant to a jurisdiction, to a governance. So it must follow policies that are defined in the system. And we start with GDPR and the EU AI Act, and then we add many other policies. And the way we do this, and again, this is not a topic that can be covered right now in great detail, but we have these keys around verifiable authority, the policy clearance, as we said. What happens if they don't follow the policy? We immediately stop it, escalate it, and all of that. At times, it needs a human in the loop, but that's only a small component. It's not the answer to everything. So that, and complete immutable ledger of evidence of everything that the agent has done. So all of that, this is what we are definitely using as a core component of everything we build, so that it's properly governed. Every action is documented, and we know what happens around this. Of course, in the future we will show more. We will show how what we build, they are passing through this protocol, how they are logging things, how they're being stopped if something goes wrong. And we have some demos around this, but it's a longer story, and if anyone's interested, we can show it later. So I think with that, let's. I think I have already overrun a bit. I will stop and maybe hand over back to Hans.
Yeah, and so my last slides are more or less on, let's say, the benefits of becoming a BIAN member, and of course, getting access to the tools is one of the benefits. Joining a community that is looking forward. But I think I would like to use the last 4 or 5 minutes to answer some of the questions that I cannot answer, Anab, so you need to answer them. So the first one is a part of the concept generated code that is ready to pass standards like SAST and the usual DevOps tools part of the SLDC needed to go to production.
Yeah, so in terms of whether the generated code passes that, that's one of the things we had as a feedback, I think, already from South Africa. So that's something we're working on. So, whatever we generate, they should, it's not there right now, but they will pass all of these tests very soon. We have already testing it. It's not published yet, but yes, they would be able to pass all the, ISO based. There are 5, 6, 7 security requirement standards that we have to pass, and we are going to make sure they pass all of that. But even more, they should pass anything around the EU AI Act, around GDPR. And the way we are building it is you can also add certain policies, things that don't exist today, that you can add in a generic way. So whatever we generate passes that. Yeah.
Okay, Arnab, the next one is this based on GraphRec, and what is the probability of hallucinations?
Um, if we're talking about the second part, yes, we're using graphs. Graph rack, no, we are using something else, Neo4j, I think. But what is the probability of hallucinations? Yes, there is a probability of hallucinations, of course, but I think when you look at the results that we have got, the things we have tested, it's really good. It's really good. I would go back and say, if a human being was to do it, in most cases, this tool would return better results or equally good results as a human being, especially if they're a knowledgeable human being, it would return equally good results. And the idea is not to take it as face value. The idea is to take it, review it, and then use it. It's to help people do things. It's not going to automate everything end to end. The idea is to take the output, review it, and then use it. Yeah.
Okay, and then we have a question on the API is not a part of the standard as per BIAN documentation. Is it just a suggested implementation?
No, the idea is absolutely to make the API a part of the standard. That's why we are trying to get more towards implementation. I think traditionally that has been BIAN's position in the past, that it's just a reference architecture and the API is just a bit of a guideline. I don't think that's where the BIAN board is going. I think the idea is definitely to make it part of the standard, make it closer to implementation. Whatever takes us closer to implementation, is where we are going. And that doesn't mean that if somebody wants to use BIAN without the APIs, they can't. They absolutely can. They don't need to use the APIs. But if they want to, then it's there to help get closer to implementation.
Okay, and we have one question left, but it's a huge question from Veselina. So we cannot answer that in 1 minute because I think it's 6 or 7 questions. So we will answer them offline. So in the email you will receive with a link to the video, with a link to the slides, and you will also get a Word document where we have answered all the questions. So we are on the top of the hour. So thank you very, very, very much for joining us. If you have any questions, please reach out to info@bian.org, and we will try to answer them as soon as possible and as accurate as possible. I would like to thank Anap by not only giving us a huge amount of detail what's going on, but also not sticking to the time. So that was very well done, Anap. So I think we give you an insight, and you also saw that there is more to come. There will be improvements on the existing materials, and so we are very confident that the whole set of development we are going to will help organizations to speed up their modernization effort, to decomponentize their current IT environment, and move it in towards a standard way of working and a standard industry model. So again, thank you very much. Hope to see you at the next webinar. Anap, thank you. Yvonne, thank you. And we close this session.
Thank you.